Good morning everybody and welcome to Ginger and Spice, which seems a bit weird because we're not actually in Market Drayton at Ginger and Spice, but obviously due to the coronavirus things are a bit different this year, but you're in for a treat nonetheless, and I wish I could see all of you guys, Julia and the team. You've done a fantastic job over the years, and you know, we love as chefs contributing to the success of the festival. So today I'm in the Ram, which is a project that my wife and son all got involved in during lockdown. Obviously we couldn't go to the pub, so we built one. But also, along with that, we built an outdoor cooking area with Kadai fire bowls. We've got a solid top, we've got camping stoves. But today I wanted to do something different. I wanted to cook on something a little bit different. So I've got what is called a Chinese steamboat. Now, called a Chinese steamboat, it's called a Thai hot pot, it's called a shabu shabu. And basically what you do is, this is filled with the stock, charcoal goes in the bottom, and it just simmers your broth, or it can be used as a Chinese fondue, and you dip the meat in, the raw meat, and it cooks in the stew. So I'm going to cook on the Kadai today, and I like to use my machete, as I learned over lockdown. So I'm just going to pop some water in there. Now, none of these measurements are going to be, it's how you want to tailor it yourself. So we'll get the water in to make the broth. And the broth is really, really simple. And obviously there's going to be a list of ingredients and a method of how to actually do this. I'm going to start by putting in some chicken powder, which you can get this from most Chinese supermarkets and even online. So I'm just going to pop that in there, and that's going to give us a quick chicken stock. Now this is going to be quite akin to a Vietnamese pho in a way. So I've got some Chinese 5-spice, which I'm just going to pop in there. And it's just going to give it that real depth of flavour. Then followed by some fish sauce, Thai fish sauce, which is nam pla. Absolutely delicious, and it always adds a good sort of ground base to the stock. Now the steak I've seasoned with, and that's what we're doing. That's what we're using. We're using a local ribeye, and I'm going to use Kadode Cambodian pepper. Pepper is my favourite spice. Pepper and ginger, I think. And I'm just going to put a couple of these in there, but I've also seasoned the steak with it as well. So that's just going to give it a little bit of background. I've got some ginger. Now I'm lazy, so I just got some ginger puree. There we go. So representing the ginger and the spice. In my fresh ingredients, I've got the aromats. Now this is the most important bit, which is garlic, chili and lemongrass. And if you've got kaffir lime leaves or anything like that, you can use that too. I'm just going to pop that in there. And it's important to not chop them too much, because they're going to sit in the stock for quite a while. There we go. It's very hot, as you can imagine. So we'll just give that a little bit of that. It's already starting to come to the boil. There we go. And then when you know you've actually finished this dish, you can pop a tile on the table and pop the steamboat in the middle, and just put a few pieces of charcoal from the fire in there, and it'll keep it warm, much like the Chinese table warmers that used to be very, very popular. You'd have them in Chinese Indian restaurants throughout the 70s and 80s. You didn't really see much of them in the 90s, but they are making a bit of a comeback, and this is going to be wonderful. Right. So my other ingredients are, I've got some ban pho noodles, which are gluten-free rice noodles. They're predominantly used in a lot of Vietnamese cooking, equally Thai or Laotian or Cambodian. They're not particularly heavy, but they are filling, and they're very good for you. They're light. They're not like an egg noodle or a Japanese noodle that's made with kansui. I've also got some tender stem broccoli, some French beans, some slightly chopped spring onions. I've got some carrot, which is cut into julienne. I'm just going to pop that in. There we go. And I've also got a chili sauce. Now, a chili sauce containing oil as well. It's entirely up to what you want, really, in terms of the heat, because I've already put chili in it. But I think this just adds a real depth. So I'm using a fermented black bean and chili, which is a Taiwanese one, and it's delicious. And there's lots of oil in it, and the oil is great because the oil sticks to the noodles and gives you that real super slurp. So there we go. Now this particular brand we use at the Mitten, and I used it over the years at Momonoki and the Peachtree. This one's great because they do this one with the fermented black bean, but they also do one with peanut and tofu, and it's wonderful. And they're vegan and very user friendly. A lot goes a long way. Okay, so now as you can see, it's starting to come to the boil. Just got to get my cloth 1 second. And also these steamboats, they're provided with a lid. So the lid goes on, as you can see. So I can pop that on there now, and it will aid the broth to speed up cooking. And equally, obviously, there's a central chamber, and in that central chamber, I can add charcoal to it, and obviously it's going to stay warm forever. So now, having got my cloth, now as you can see, I'm cooking with a machete on there. This is a machete I got from Gambia when I went, Uganda, when I went and did the run for Self Help Africa. Now, I use this all the time, hence the reason it's black. So it was only last week I was cooking a biryani, and to sear the meat I just put it directly on the machete, and the results were wonderful. It's kind of like using a pan, but it's not. And obviously, since creating this area during lockdown for my wife and son, it's been a real revelation. Even for me, I've learned new cooking methods, and it's been great. And you work with what you've got. So let's just pull that lid off there. Now this broth is starting to come up, so let's just give it a try. Now all those aromats that I put in there, they're all the oils are starting to release. As you can see on there, you know, there's some lovely chili oil. That's delicious. That's absolutely delicious. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop in the noodles. Now these always come like in this almost styrofoam form, and you've got to sort of tear them apart. Now they won't take long to wilt. You never boil these really. You never boil them in a pan. You just add some hot water. Well, this water's hot, so they'll start to break up in there. Now we're not going to add the greens until the last minute, until I've cooked the steak. There we go. So as you can see now, they're actually starting to break down. So we've got this lovely noodle soup forming. There we go. Now let's have a look at this steak. So there we go. So I've rubbed it with a little chili oil and slightly crushed in the pestle and mortar some of the Cambodian peppercorns, which are really fragrant. But I've only done the one side, so I'm going to give that a little bit of a turn now and get it on both sides. Because, like I said, we're going to cook this on the machete. We're not going to cook it for very long. In fact, we're literally going to sear it. We're going to let it rest. We're going to slice it on the chopping board, and then literally add it to the liquor and cook it however you want. So if you like it well done, if you like it medium, but for the purposes of this, I'm just going to cook it rare, and then I like it medium rare, to be honest. So I'm literally just going to drop that in with a pair of chopsticks and then pull it out when it's done, and you get that lovely chili slurpiness. There we go. It can be quite tricky cooking on the machete, so you probably would be better with a flat plate, but well, you'll see in a minute when we cook the steak. But yeah, you don't want flaming chili oil in your face. So the noodles are starting to break down now nicely, and that's coming up to a nice temperature. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this off now. I'm going to put the lid on and I'm going to let it rest. So there we go, there's the lid. There we go. And I can hear that bubbling away nicely. So we'll just pop that on there. Now those noodles will obviously start to rehydrate very, very quickly, but you can hear it ticking away nicely. So let's take our ribeye and we're going to pop that with that chili oil and all and the Cambodian pepper and cook it on the machete. So you're going to get a really, really crusty sear, and all those bits that overhang, they're going to get nice and charred. So there's going to be lots and lots of different textures in there. Just clear the chopping board. And today, to pair with this, what I've done is Evil Twin Brewing, absolutely fantastic. They're a New York company, and this is the James Beer, named after the James Beard Award. But it's a great Indian pale ale. It's absolutely delicious and the perfect accompaniment for, well, let's be honest, a lot of chili. So we'll give that a sip. Woo! That's got a real kick. It should have, it's 5%. That's fantastic, actually. As ever, you know, whenever we do something like this, these events are brought to you by, you know, Netherton Foundry. We've got Netherton Foundry Prospector Pan. We've got a Kadai Fireball. I've got my Risden apron, my Joel Black knife. You know, these people have supported us over the years, and it's always nice to give them a shout out. So, I think I'll turn the steak. There you go. And look, you get this piece in the middle that comes straight off the machete. It's wonderful. It's fantastic, actually. So you get this nice crust, especially where the overhang is, where the flames can lick it. Obviously the flames have died down somewhat now, but I think that's going to be fantastic. So we'll take that off in about 45 seconds or so and just allow it to rest, and then we'll go back and have a look at the steamboat. Cheers, Julia. Really missing you this year. Oddly enough, Julia and I were supposed to go to India for a trip in March, and sadly that obviously never happened, but actually in retrospect it's probably a good thing. I think we would have been stuck there for quite some time. So there we go. We'll take our steak off, crusted with that lovely Cambodian pepper. Now, like I said, we need to rest that, so we'll go back to the steamboat. Now, these steamboats, they're relatively cheap from any site, Amazon, Etsy. You can even buy vintage ones. I've been looking at a gold vintage one, a really old Chinese one. And there we go. As you can see in there, that is looking fantastic. So I think it's time now that we drop in our greens, and I always keep the greens to the last minute, primarily to keep a crunch, but it always keeps a wonderful colour. So there we go. And you know, the crunchier you keep it, the more texture you actually add to the dish. There we go. So I'll just slightly immerse that. I've also got some herbs picked from the garden. Obviously during lockdown we've been quite proactive with growing. So we've got some coriander, we've got some mint, and we've got some dill, just as that nod to the Vietnamese pho, because the aromatics add such wonderful things. So you've got all these wonderful herbs. You've got the garlic, you've got the chili, you've got the ginger, you've got the fish sauce, and it really makes for a pleasant eating experience, because you get a little bit of everything. Now, I'm not a massive fan of bean sprouts, but you know, to this you probably would ordinarily add bean sprouts, but I'm not a huge fan unless it's like in a banh mi sandwich or something like that. The great thing about these is you can actually cook whatever you want in them. If it's primarily soup based, I suppose at a push you really could do a fondue in it. I wouldn't want to wash the pan afterwards. There we go. So that's all sort of coming together now. So I just pull the noodles around that central funnel. There we go. And now let's turn our attention to the steak in hand. Okay, so like I said, I'm using a ribeye, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that little bit of fat out because I cooked it rare and I don't really want that fat in there. I mean, if anything, that fat itself, because fat is flavour, can go into the broth. So obviously that's going to break off into two parts. We're going to give it a quick slice. There we go. And some bits are going to be rarer than others. Like I said, there was a bit of an overhang on the steak itself. But you know, equally you could cook it on a plancha or a flat plate or even a pan. There we go. That is breakfast. Fantastic. So we've got a lovely steamboat broth there, like a Vietnamese pho, cooking nicely away, simmering away. And remember, the longer you leave it, obviously the more the noodles are going to overcook, which is why I chose a rice noodle as opposed to an egg noodle, which would lose its integrity fairly quickly. So what we'll do is we'll garnish this now with some of our beef. And as ever, my trusty assistant in this is my wife. She's filming. She's got quite used to well, a different kind of festival life over lockdown. You know, we've done quite a few things virtually, which in itself has been quite a learning curve. But like I said, next year we'll be back in that cookery theatre, cooking up a storm for you guys. So we'll take our aromats. So like I said, we've got some dill. And dill is a favourite in Vietnam, especially in a dish called chua ca. Well, there's only one restaurant that actually serves it in the north, which I had the privilege to go to, and absolutely wonderful, really, really fragrant. And there we go. We just add some coriander. I love coriander. I think it's my favorite herb of all, actually. There we go. Just cleans everything up, gives it a delicious flavor. So, to recap, we have our steamboat. And it's no specific steamboat. It can be whatever you want. So if you want to use pork, use pork. If you want to use chicken. Just make sure you cook the chicken. Equally, a couple of weeks ago, I was with one of my boys and we were developing stuff for the new menu, and we dropped in a bit of game. We dropped in an egg. An egg is always a good one. 2 or 3 eggs. We're lucky enough to have our own chicken, so we've got a great supply or permanent supply of eggs. Even down to these little blue ones, which are delicious. And then we've topped that with the beef, and that is going to be brunch, breakfast / lunch. So just to recap, I really miss all you guys. We will be back next year, and let's hope that we're not having to do this again or socially distance, but it would be a privilege and an honor, because for the last few years it's been great to see your smiley faces in the audience coming to try this, and sadly you can't because you're too far away and you're not allowed to. So yum, it's all for me and the wife. Shout out to Evil Twin Brewing. James beer is wonderful, and I think that's it. I think it's time to eat. I'm actually starving. So if you can stay at home, stay at home. If you can stay safe, stay safe. In fact, just stay safe. And most of all, let's protect that wonderful NHS. A big chin chin and a big cheers to Julia. and your team. You're always doing a wonderful job and promoting spices and the spice trail, which makes our job even better because the food makes it more delicious, it makes it more wonderful, and always adds an element of surprise. So take care, guys, and we'll see you next year.